Because there are a lot of them. $192 million. That's just what the film brought in its first 3 days. It's now projected to hit $218 million for its 4-day total. That's not only the highest opening ever for a February film, it's the largest President's Day weekend opening for a film, and it's in the top 5 movie openings of all.
After the release of Marvel's Black Panther film in 2019, characters of color in film and comics roles began to change. We see black characters transition from side roles to being the main protagonists. In this documentary, 3 experts on pop culture and 3 fans discuss the representation of black superheroes.
I mean, I've been a fan of comics and then comic figures in that transition to film that's happened in the last 20 years for a long, long time. On a scholarly level, it's increasingly become clear to me that, as has always been the case, comics and now their transition into film really are expressions of the zeitgeist. They're expressions of a kind of cultural collective consciousness, and are therefore really important to study both anthropologically but also to understand where we're at here culturally at the beginning of the 20th century. I think a really telling example pre-Black Panther was Wesley Snipes' Blade. Blade's a vampire hunter, right? That's what he does. And it's a great action, it's a great role for Wesley Snipes because he's such a great action figure and so athletic and everything. Blade's great, he's got a sword, he's got all this stuff. But what makes Blade special is he's kind of part vampire himself, right? Because his mother was attacked by a vampire when she was pregnant with him, and so he's sort of got human and vampire qualities. But I think that's exactly the sort of way in which we still see the racism present there, where he only gets to be a superhero because he's also part the monster that he hunts. And that's what we've done to the black male body forever, right? The anthropologists will call this the thugification of the black male, where this figure exists in culture only as a kind of predator, only as a kind of criminal, only as a kind of monster that then the kind of white fear can set itself up against. And even though Blade is a positive figure and a monster hunter and held up as a kind of hero, he still had to also be part monster to make it. And that's why I think Black Panther is so important, right? Because we shed all of that by the time we got to that film, and we really got a nuanced and sophisticated relationship of kind of rounded character. So I think those early ones are important, and we can trace the evolution of this through them, but I think we're also tracing the evolution of American racism here too, which is, something that we need to trace and we need to be aware of and we need to hold out, but we also need to not let it off the hook for what it was doing there, if that makes sense.
I think it just comes down to money and what the company or the production company feels will best fit and will best adapt to the audience and the culture. But I think that's been the biggest thing, the money. I feel like you got guys like Chadwick Boseman and women like Lupita who have established themselves as great actors, and as well as many other great black actors who've established themselves with lead roles and have shown that they can, have box office numbers.
This is in so many parts of our culture where we'll either erase or just exclude non-white bodies, and not just folks from the African diaspora, all sorts of non-white bodies. Or we'll stereotype them into those sort of roles that the white culture is very, very comfortable with, right? And these tend to be obviously very negative and very flat roles. And so I think in that way, comics and film and popular culture, unfortunately is the expression of the zeitgeist, where we see the institutional racism that this country's been founded on and has been operating on and continues to operate on, reflected in that absence of really authentic representations of black folks.
I think that before the Black Panther film, it was unclear to many in the film industry, and I guess maybe even many in society at large, whether there was an audience that was going to be big enough for there to be a large profit on African American superheroes that have their own film. So you saw a lot of films that have African American superheroes, but they're always like somebody's sidekick. And I think what that film demonstrated is not only is there a hunger and a need for that, for African American superheroes to have like standalone films where they are the stars, but also that the market can support it, and that it will be extremely lucrative for industry entities, TV studios and such, or streaming platforms, etc., for them to make more of that and to make it widely available, because that film was immensely popular and immensely successful.
I'd say that we're getting better with it. I know, like, it started with like Halle Berry doing like Catwoman and stuff like that, and so it was getting there, and now we see like the Black Panther and just different like very high quality showings of like the Black superheroes. And even though there's not very many, it's good that they're getting the ones that are in the universe out, you feel me, into the like the cinematic era.
You know, one of the things that I think is really important in modern superhero movies, films, especially something like Black Panther, is that you have a figure who is Black and powerful in and of himself, because that's the society he comes from. Like, he's not powerful because American society, white society, has granted him this power. You know, Wakanda has its own resources. Wakanda has its own might, and he controls it.
Growing up, I never had a hero that looked like me. I would always have to, envision myself as them. You know, I couldn't really have a real representation of what that was. So I think it's come a long way, and I think it's going in the right direction.
Like for girls, like Barbies and other things like that, they didn't have African American depicted characters for young Black girls, so like superheroes and cartoon characters for young men.
It's not immediately obvious to white America that something is missing unless it like hits them in the face in like a kind of a Peggy McIntyre or McIntyre kind of invisible knapsack, white privilege kind of way, right? Where they just like, they don't see it until they like somebody makes them see it, right? So I think that's what that movie did, because I think that like Black people always knew that this was a need, right? I think it's like white people had to see it too, and I think that's part of what that movie and the subsequent marketing ventures that followed it show us. So like, yeah, like this is a thing that we didn't have before, and we needed it, and now we need more of it.